Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sam's Comic Spot, where today I'm going to be covering Zatanna Bring Down the House by Mariko Tamaki and Javier Rodriguez. Now, this is a standalone story that is published under the DC Black Label imprint, which means it is intended for mature readers and that it generally functions as a standalone story. Before I dive into it, let's just take a look at the spine real quick. Nothing too fancy, although there is the DC Black Label label at the bottom. And then here's the back. The back offers a quick synopsis on the book, and it tells you the contents, which is Zatanna, Bring Down the House, issues 1 to 5. And here is what the book looks like on my shelf. Now, real quick before diving into the contents of the book, I just wanted to compare the size of it to a Marvel omnibus. Now, Zatanna here is a standard-sized hardcover, while the Marvel and DC omnibus, such as Hawkeye by Matt Fraction on the left here, is an oversized book. So there is a slight difference in the height. So yes, Zatanna being a standard-sized hardcover means that this is not being treated as a deluxe edition, which DC has been frequently publishing over the past several years. Although I wouldn't be surprised if this book ended up being a part of that label in the future. So the insides of the dust jacket include a quote from the book, as well as some information on the creators. The artwork that is featured on the board, both on the front and the back, both are illustrated by Javier Rodriguez, and I believe that they are both from the single issues that this book collects. Okay, here we go, diving into Zatanna Bring Down the House, written by Mariko Tamaki. Now, Tamaki has previously worked on Wonder Woman, Wolverine, She-Hulk, and I believe currently she is writing a Detective Comics run over at DC. But anyway, into the first issue here. This issue really focuses on the mundanity of Zatanna's current life, where she's working in Las Vegas doing cheap card tricks effectively and is avoiding any form of magic. And the comic makes it pretty clear immediately that she was practicing magic when she was a child, but something went horribly wrong and it caused her to swear off using magic. And something I appreciated about this first issue was how accessible it felt. I didn't really know much about Zatanna before this. I had read the Batman by Paul Dini omnibus, and she appeared a few times in there, but apart from that, I knew basically nothing about the character. So, this book, even though it's not canon, it was a really effective introduction into the world of Zatanna, so to speak. In fact, I chose to read this basically straight after I finished the Batman by Paul Dini omnibus, just because I was fascinated by the character and wanted to know a little bit more about, who this magic user is, because I've always been drawn to the sort of supernatural side of both DC and Marvel. I'm a big fan of Doctor Strange, for instance, so Zatanna seemed like a fitting character for me to try to get into. And I suppose that I want to circle back to the DC Black Label imprint, because, going into this, I was familiar with the label and I was expecting this story to be much darker. When in actuality, it wasn't as dark as I was expecting. It was, it still had mature elements, but it was not as heavy, I suppose, compared to other DC Black Label titles. Maybe that's a detriment to it because it's, consequently, it's not as, I don't know, it's not as memorable compared to something like Batman Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison, for instance. But I mean, like I said, the book's purpose really to me was to introduce new readers to Zatanna without just doing an adaptation of her origin story. So, in that regard, I think the book succeeded. So, although I wouldn't consider the story to be anything too revolutionary, if anything, it's one of those comics where the artwork is really what propels it and drives it forward. Um, I found that the book had a great pace, which made it very easy to read. Like I got through it in just one sitting. In fact, it was mainly Javier Rodriguez's artwork and Mariko Tamaki's use of tone and her voice for Zatanna that kept me coming back. And in fact, I loved that Rodriguez's artwork reminded me of David Aja's work on Hawkeye, as well as Joelle Jones's Lady Killer. Something else I also appreciated was the inclusion of John Constantine. Now, Constantine is a character that I knew a little bit more about compared to Zatanna, but my knowledge of him is still fairly limited. I've seen the film with Keanu Reeves, which I really enjoyed. Even though I know it's not like considered an accurate depiction of the character by any means. Now, aside from mentioning that Constantine makes an appearance in the book, I'm going to keep my thoughts on the overall story somewhat limited, just so that you can go into it with a fresh experience and, I guess, become as engrossed in both of these characters as I have already become. I'm very eager to read more of Constantine in particular. I mean, with Zatanna, I know that Paul Dini wrote a run. I think that was in the early 2010s, if I'm not mistaken. But again, aside from that, I don't really know what else to read from Zatanna. With Constantine, I know there's a lot more to go at, so to speak. So I'm hoping I can get around to reading some of his runs in the near future. So I'm just going to skip ahead to the variant cover gallery now. And there is also some concept art of key characters in the book. And yeah, that's about it for Zatanna Bring Down the House. So although Zatanna Bring Down the House is really a standalone graphic novel that is carried by its distinctive artwork, I still think it's a very recommendable reading experience overall. I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely encourage anyone who is remotely interested in Zatanna to give it a read. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it this far, and yeah, goodbye.